Thank you very much, Whit. Appreciate that. Good morning again and welcome. My name is John Mallory Land, and I'll be your volunteer service leader for this service. We welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Columbus. We are an inclusive community of folks encouraging one another as each of us travels our own personal spiritual journey. Some of us regard this as a religious community. Others think of it as a spiritual community. For some of us, it's an ethical oasis. In any event, it's a coming together of people we love and people who love us. We support each other in our respective searches for truth and meaning. We also take action together to strengthen our fellowship and to make our local community and the world better places in which to live. We have a couple of announcements to get to. Next Sunday, our service leader will be yours truly, and I'll also be doing a presentation, the title of which is It's the End of the World as We Know It. So stay tuned for that. I hope you'll join us for that. The flaming chalice symbolizes reason, tolerance, and freedom, and also justice, compassion, and love. May its light ever illuminate our lives and its warmth comfort us. I like to revisit the 7 principles. I know we don't do them in every service, but sometimes we have guests. We may because of the holiday season. So let's affirm the 7 principles that sum up the essential values we as Unitarian Universalists embrace and promote. I'll read them aloud. You can read with me if you wish. The first. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. That's not supposed to. There we go. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Well, we'll move on to our offering. Whit is going to play for us Venetian Boat Song by Felix Mendelssohn. And your offerings, big or small, strengthen the fellowship. Whether they're offerings of money or of time, talents, and energy, they're given and received in the spirit of grateful fellowship. I'm going to read a selection for us this morning. If you'd like to follow along in the Singing the Living Tradition, it's number 644, if you care to. The Unfalling Treasure. I called on God, and the spirit of wisdom came to me. I preferred her to scepters and thrones, and I accounted wealth as nothing in comparison with her. Neither did I liken to her any priceless gem, because all gold is but a little sand in her sight. Silver will be accounted as clay before her. I loved her more than health and beauty, and I chose to have her rather than light, because her radiance never ceases. All good things came to me along with her, and in her hands uncounted wealth. I rejoiced in them all, because wisdom leads them. But I did not know that she was their mother. I learned without guile, and I impart without grudging. I do not hide her wealth, for it is an unfailing treasure for mortals. That's from the Wisdom of Solomon. And now we've come to the main event. We have a guest this morning. So glad to have him with us. Rabbi Shmuel Polin is the rabbi of Temple Israel in Columbus. A greater Philadelphia, New Jersey native, Shmuel completed his BA at American University in Washington, D.C., where he studied Jewish studies and international studies. He also completed both an MA in Holocaust and Genocide Studies and an MA in Jewish Studies from Gratz College in Melrose, Pennsylvania. His thesis focused on the depiction of European anti-Semitism in the 1930s and 1940s, American and foreign cinema. Shmuel has years of experience teaching Hebrew school in New Hope, Pennsylvania, leading as a student rabbi the Beth Baruch Temple in Richmond, Indiana, and Temple Israel in Paducah, Kentucky, and also working for Israeli non-governmental organizations. Rabbi Polin, his wife Daniela, and son Micah moved to Columbus in 2021 and look forward to meeting all of us very soon. So without further ado, please help me welcome Rabbi Pullman.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I was excited when Bill Harlan reached out to me about speaking today. You see, Unitarian Universalism, it holds a special part and place of my soul. Yes, I am an ordained Reformed rabbi. However, Unitarian Universalist faith has a close relationship with Reform Judaism. I have cousins who attend a Unitarian Universalist center, but they still retain their beliefs in Judaism. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and for a very long time, a large segment of most Unitarian Universalist associations in Northeast Philadelphia, they were demographically overwhelmingly Jewish. As many of you may also be aware, the first Jew to run for president in this country was at one time affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Association, and his name was Senator Barry Goldwater. Some of you may remember his run for presidency, and he left a lasting legacy on American politics. It is hard to say how much of an influence Goldwater's faith had on his politics, though. Today, neither the Unitarian Universalist Association nor the various divisions of Judaism would rush to claim him as their own. He opportunistically would acclaim and affirm his faith in either Judaism or Unitarian Universalism throughout his political career. Today, both our faith movements have moved in a very different direction in politics and away from Goldwater. However, the social tapestry that binds our faiths together is what brings me here today. Here, the principles are synthesized into 7 principles with 6 sources. For our Jewish faith, and more specifically of Reform Judaism's denominations, we affirm these values as our own. We have a very similar article that guides our faith in the same direction. The guiding force is known as the Articles of Principles for Reform Judaism. And the first version of the guiding principles of faith of Reform Judaism, it was drafted in 1886, and it is more commonly known as the Pittsburgh Platform. Originally, this included 8 guiding principles. And the first and the 6th principles, they directly ground themselves in a calling for Universalism. They recognize that within every religion is an attempt to grasp the infinite. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and later on in the 7th principle, they vary in affirming our faith as guided by scientific reasoning. The final principle strives to regulate relations between the rich and the poor and solve justice for righteousness and problems presented by the evils of societies in present day. Since 1886, the principles of faith have undergone various adaptations and redraftings. In 1937, they were redrafted again in 1976 and 1997, and finally in 1999, where the principles of faith drafted and redrafted for Reform Judaism. Each rendition was grounded by the same beliefs, though, to a varying degree. Adaptations were made, though, to be contemporaneous to the modern language and fixations of society. The most recent principles of faith for Reform Judaism have returned, though, to more traditional Jewish language and have underscored our connections to the land of Israel and to Zionism. However, it should be no mystery how and why many of our parishioners have found a warm welcome in your faith community. If you read in between the text of the principles of faith of Reform Judaism and compare them to the 7 principles of faith of Unitarian Universalism, you will find much in common. The underscoring of Universalism in both traditions are not compromisable. Justice and equality are affirmed in the guiding principles of faith in both of our traditions. Both traditions have made considerable efforts in welcoming both interfaith families and members of the LGBTQ community into our houses of worship. Equality, human rights, progressive values are the center stage of my faith in the rabbinate. Prior to coming to rabbinical seminary, I devoted myself to obtaining a bachelor's in international relations in Washington, D.C., and a master's in Holocaust and genocide studies. And most who go about the path that I began ascend into public policy and work in the State Department or overseas for a period of time. Most of my classmates, with whom I graduated with in Washington, D.C., today affect changes to our public policy internally. However, I took a different path in life. I lost my faith in politics and in public policy somewhere along my journey. I chose to help people by way of faith. Faith leaders, they still have the ability to affect positive change in our world. And faith is a vehicle for change. Without a faith community on board to sail the winds of change, public policy would fall flat on its face. Today, I am here to affirm these shared values in our tradition. We share much in common with our traditions and our faith. May our common creeds continue to unite our communities together in a common vision with common goals. We have congregants who are active in your association, and they are among your most active members, and some of them are here today. We welcome anyone to attend our services as well anytime. And as the new rabbi of Temple Israel, I am very active and will continue to be very active in issues that affect public policy as they relate to our mutual faith traditions. Speaking up and out on behalf of minority communities will always be part of my rabbinate, and I hope you all be there to be by my side in the future of my rabbinate here in Columbus. I'd like to thank you all for the warm welcome here today, and I look forward to a bright future here in Columbus. And I'd like to ask any questions. I don't know if we open that up for afterwards or...
No, just this one.
Yes.
I saw online that you have a little bit of background as an artist as well.
Yes.
And that you had worked on the art project.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about
Absolutely. Okay. So in my final year of rabbinical seminary, we all do a final thesis or a capstone project. What I decided I wanted to do was, in my year of study, my first year of study of rabbinical seminary at HUC, Hebrew Union College, I visited one of the museums in Israel. It was the Diaspora Museum, and they had the reconstructed roof of a synagogue that existed in Poland. And I remember standing beneath that roof and thinking, this is gorgeous. My final year of seminary, I want to create something replicated from one of these synagogues and bring it back to life. All of these synagogues in Europe had been destroyed in the Holocaust. These were the wooden synagogues that were enormous structures. They took decades to build, and they stood the test of time hundreds of years in Eastern Europe. All of them were burnt down, though, during the Holocaust. As a result, we don't have any of them standing today, any of the arcs at least. The roofs, one of them was restored and brought to Israel. However, none of the arcs survived the war. We did have architectural blueprints, so what I decided I wanted to do if I wanted to rebuild an ark to its entirety was I went into Polish archives, I found architectural blueprints, and I rebuilt a Torah ark that housed Torah scrolls from one of the wooden synagogues of Europe and rebuilt it by hand. Everything had to be carved by hand. It's a 20-foot tall Torah ark. If you go to my website, you can see some of the pictures of the ark. It took about a year to build. There was a fundraising process that went on with it as well. It's right now in the Skirball Museum of Cincinnati, and it's going to be going to another museum afterwards. Just a fantastic project. All of the paints had to be created by hand. That means you have to take pigments, and you have to find binders. All of the whites had to be made from rabbit skin glue, mashed up marble, and I had to make them all by hand as well. So it was a monumental project, an exciting thing to do, and yeah. So. Thank you.
We once had a member of your temple over, well, more than one have attended our services. Mm-hmm. And I had a discussion with one, and we were talking about the faith part of it, and is there something that you have to believe in? And this lady, said, yes, we have to believe in God. And I wonder if that's still the case. And if that is the case, how would you define God?
So that's a good question. Do you have to believe in God to be a Jew? Halakhically, according to Jewish law, no, you don't. According to Jewish law, you are, it's a birthright. It's a birthright that you were born with. We talk about Barry Goldwater, for instance, today. He was a Jew. He identified himself as a Jew throughout his life. Did he have a belief in Judaism? Questionable, very questionable. I would say not. I don't think he attested to a belief in Judaism throughout his lifetime, but he was socially as well as ethnically Jewish. So is there a faith component upon being a Jew? No. In Judaism, yes. In Judaism, there is a faith component. However, it is possible to be a Jew, and there are many people who are a Jew but don't have a faith component. And what are the faith components of being Jewish? Well, it depends on denomination to denomination. In Reform Judaism, they're guided by 8 principles upon their inception with a Pittsburgh platform, which I referred to earlier today, which have been updated throughout over 100 years. But within conservative Judaism, it's been synthesized it's not been synthesized, it's been the opposite of synthesized. It's been expanded into a complex system of 613 mitzvot, or commandments, that Jews are expected to engage with. None of those are built upon faith, though. They're based upon how you act and how you go about your life on a day-to-day exercise. Orthodox Judaism, very similarly. There's not a built-in component. Ideally, there is. Ideally, you do a commandment. Ideally, you give to the poor. Ideally, you do things, and they affirm your faith in God. But is it necessary? Not so much, I'd say.
So Buddhism is often said to be the religion of lists, and at the risk of including Judaism in that, what are the 8 principles that you mentioned earlier?
So the 8 principles are actually, it's on the desk at the back, but as I tried to synthesize them best earlier, is there's the first, and as well as I think it's the 5th, are based upon Universalism, and I'm talking about the original from the 1880s. Then there's a series of other principles that are guided by scientific principles, and the final principle is one about building democratic values, equality in our world. Now, since the 1880s, they have been redrafted again and again. Our most recent one is from 1999, and that has returned to more traditional Jewish language and affirmation. But the guiding principles from the 1880s still retain themselves in our guiding principles of faith for Reform Judaism.
I'll hold it, John.
We don't listen very well. Good morning. I would like you to address anti-Semitism.
Thank you. Yeah.
As far as when I grew up, I grew up in the Jewish community. My name is Comiskey.
Okay.
And as I grew into an adult, I really felt that things were getting better. Mm-hmm. But this past 5, 7, 10 years, and what's happening here in the United States and in Europe, it seems to be coming out.
Yeah.
How do you, as a person, as a Jew, as a rabbi, feel about that?
Yeah. So addressing anti-Semitism, it's a very important question. I will say that for the first 15 years of my life, anti-Semitism may have existed, but it was carefully hidden from the periphery of my consciousness. Went to a JCC. I know there was, as a child, there was a shooting at the JCC. It was one of the JCCs, not fortunately the one that I went to, but one not far from us. I was aware of anti-Semitism as a child growing up, but it did not enter directly into my life on I would say, a constant basis, or even a semi-constant basis. Maybe a combination of a perfect storm, which has occurred in the past several years to raise anti-Semitism, some of which may be described because of social political changes going on in this country, and situationally, the other may be that I became a rabbi, and becoming a rabbi, you attract that sort of attention, unfortunately. Since becoming the rabbi of Temple Israel, we must have received 5, 6, maybe more anti-Semitic letters directly to the temple, addressed to me or to the community. I think Charlottesville was a wake-up call for at least myself, as well as many members of the Jewish community, that anti-Semitism is a very serious problem, and it's not going anywhere, and we need to respond accordingly. How we respond depends on who you ask. If you're asking, are you asking how I believe we should respond? Yeah. I'd like to follow the lead of the Anti-Defamation League and Jewish organizations that are very insistent that we file lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit against anyone who is directly responsible for hate crimes or intimidation of minority communities, to intimidate them out of their reckless behavior and make their lives inhospitable. If you think of some of the leading anti-Semites behind Charlottesville, since they have engaged in their nefarious plots, the Anti-Defamation League, as well as the Southern Poverty Law Center, have been engaged in filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit of the organizers of the Unite the Right rallies, and it has had absolutely positive effects in deterring further involvement and further activity. Unless we are proactive like that in the future, we will see it repeat itself. I think that that's the reaction we need to take as a community, is to respond, to not let it happen, and to speak out against it. It's a combination of forces, but I think following the lead of the Anti-Defamation League in particular is very important. Southern Poverty Law Center as well. Thank you.